Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome, focused learners, to today's explainer. When you think of ancient Buddhist texts, you probably imagine philosophical discourses on enlightenment, or maybe deep meditation manuals. But today, we're looking at something entirely different, yet honestly, equally fascinating. We are exploring the 10 recitations Vinaya, specifically fascicle 55. Now, this is not a text about abstract philosophy. It's a highly technical, rigorous, and incredibly granular ancient legal and administrative code. This is the very framework that governed how the earliest monastic communities survived, functioned, and held themselves together. So get ready because the level of detail we're about to see here absolutely rivals any modern corporate compliance manual. Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. Sangha discipline, 2. Boundaries and prohibitions, 3. Lodging and diet rules, 4. The rules of Kathina robes, and finally, 5. Schisms and Kama acts. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, Rules of Sangha Discipline, specifically looking at individual accountability. So every functioning society, whether it's a modern nation-state or an ancient monastic order, needs a reliable system of probation and rehabilitation. I mean, you can't just expel everyone who makes a minor mistake, but you also can't let rule-breaking go unchecked, right? To handle these infractions, the Vinaya established 2 formal periods of probation, Paravasa and Manata. Basically, these were the ancient monastic equivalents of probation and penance, typically lasting 6 nights. So the crucial point here is how this system penalized deception. If a monk committed an offense and immediately confessed, they just served their standard 6 nights. But if they concealed the offense, the penalties would literally stack. If you hid an offense for 2 days, your probation was extended by 2 days. The text meticulously details how multiple offenses concealed for different lengths of time are sequentially calculated. It's an algorithm, really, designed to strongly incentivize immediate honesty and transparency. Now, what's really cool is how the Vinaya is framed. It's written as a series of hyper-specific legal hypotheticals posed by a master of the law named Upali, directly to the Buddha. Upali is always asking questions that probe the very edges of the legal code. For instance, he asks, can a novice monk or even an unordained person be placed on this official probation? And the Buddha's precise ruling is a firm no. Unordained individuals, heretics, or novices do not fall under this specific monastic jurisdiction. Think of it kind of like modern judicial jurisdiction. A military court can't court-martial a civilian, right? In the exact same way, the Buddha clarifies that the severe mechanisms of Parivasa and Manata are privileges and burdens reserved exclusively for fully ordained monks. Moving right along to Section 2, Boundaries and Prohibitions, focusing on the spatial dynamics in the Sangha. This section reveals a really fascinating concept, how physical space entirely dictated the validity of legal actions within the community. And this brilliantly illustrates how the Vinaya operates almost like a physical geographical constitution. For a legal act like a trial or an ordination to actually be valid, the monks must be physically together inside a defined boundary, and they have to be either sitting or standing on the exact same level. If the person on trial is standing on the ground and the monks judging them are up on a high platform, the act is legally invalid. If half the quorum is inside the boundary line and half is outside, invalid. The law demanded absolute physical parity and presence. No one could literally look down on someone during a legal procedure. But Upali doesn't just ask about boundaries. He asks about the daily realities of wandering monks, which leads to some pretty bizarre hypotheticals. At one point, he actually asks the Buddha, can a monk cross a river by holding on to a cow's tail? And the answer is remarkably, hilariously specific. The Buddha says, no holding a female cow's tail. That crosses a line of propriety. However, and you just have to marvel at the granularity here, if you need to cross a river, you are legally permitted to hold the tail of a lion, a tiger, a wolf, an elephant, a bull, a donkey, or a horse. It's this wonderful little moment that injects a bit of unexpected reality into the text. You really got to wonder what exactly prompted the Buddha to have to explicitly permit holding a tiger's tail for aquatic transit. All right, Section 3, Lodging and Diet Rules. Let's look at the daily administration. Because beyond the high drama of trials and river crossings, a society really survives on its mundane daily administration. Resource allocation and dietary laws were absolutely paramount. The text rapidly lists dietary restrictions, and they are intense. Human flesh is strictly forbidden, as is human milk unless it's prescribed as medicine. But it goes further. Monks cannot eat swallows, kites, vultures, toads, or leeches. Now, while some of this seems totally obvious to us today, these rules actually served a vital dual purpose. They protected the monks from disease in a harsh ancient environment, and they vigorously protected the public image of the Sangha. I mean, you can't rely on the charity of the public if your dietary habits are terrifying the local townspeople. Then there's the medicine. The Vinaya categorizes medicines by strict expiration dates, acting almost like an ancient statute of limitations. You have time medicine, like yogurt, which expires at noon. 7-day medicine, like ghee, expires in a week. Lifetime medicine, like certain ashes, never expires. But the absolute genius of this legal code, it states that if a sick monk mixes these medicines together, the entire concoction legally defaults to the strictest expiration date. So if you mix lifetime medicine with time medicine, you legally must consume the whole thing before noon. It's a brilliant, foolproof way to prevent monks from hoarding valuable resources under the guise of making medicine. Moving into Section 4, Rules of Kethana Robes, or as I like to think of it, mindfulness in manufacturing. So, the Kathina was a vital annual community event where raw cloth was donated, dyed, cut, and sewn into robes all in a single day. But this wasn't just a casual sewing circle. It was bound by incredibly strict procedural law. Let's move to and see how this builds into an intense exercise in mindfulness. To produce a legally valid Kathina robe, the monk must maintain specific, highly regulated thoughts throughout the manufacturing process. During the washing, dyeing, and cutting, they must hold the 6 thoughts of intent. Then they must sequence their mind through the 3 thoughts, actively acknowledging the robe will be made, is being made, and has been made. If a monk sews the robe while daydreaming, the robe is considered legally invalid. The law demands that your intention and your action are perfectly, seamlessly unified. And because this process is a sacred administrative act that actually brings privileges to the monastery, participation is highly regulated. Just like in a modern democratic process, certain individuals lose their voting rights. Novitiates, those who broke their rainy season retreat, schismatics, expelled monks, and those guilty of severe crimes are entirely excluded from the Kathina quorum. They cannot participate and they do not reap the community benefits. It's a serious business. Which brings us to our final and most severe section, Section 5, Schisms and Karma Acts, the ultimate threat. This is the heaviest part of the Vinaya. It deals with the ultimate threat to the community, how the Sangha handles constitutional crises, supreme trials, and the actual fracturing of the order itself. The Vinaya defines a schism, or poseng, with razor-sharp legal clarity. A schism is not just a bunch of monks getting angry and not talking to each other. It's a formal, legislative split in the community. To be a legal schism, it requires 2 very specific elements: a formal proposal to separate, and the actual taking of voting tallies. It is a procedural divorce. Upali, who is always trying to find the nuance in the law, asks another probing question here. He asks the Buddha, are all schisms accompanied by loud arguments, shouting matches, and disputes? Now, what's really interesting about this rule is the Buddha's precise distinction between interpersonal conflict and institutional fracture. The Buddha answers no. A formal schism can happen entirely silently, through quiet, procedural votes. Conversely, monks can have massive, loud, screaming arguments, but as long as they don't hold a formal vote to split, the institution remains legally intact. The law cares about the procedure, not the volume of the argument. This leads right into the rules regarding Kama, the formal assemblies. The text places supreme value on procedural justice and democratic consensus. A legal, harmonious assembly requires everyone to be present, the agenda to be properly announced, and absolutely no valid objections. An illegal assembly happens when monks are intentionally excluded, proposals are hidden, or procedures are bypassed, and an illegal assembly is considered null and void, which perfectly protects the minority from the tyranny of a rogue majority. Which brings us to a really critical, high-stakes scenario. What happens when the legal system itself is weaponized? Upali asks, what happens if a faction of monks tries to use these legal procedures to illegally expel a highly respected, knowledgeable elder who understands the law deeply? Well, the ancient community aggressively protected its leadership and its unity. The Buddha rules that attempting to unjustly expel a respected elder results in a thulakaya offense. This is one of the most severe penalties in the entire monastic code, sitting just below permanent expulsion. Why? Because weaponizing the law against a wise elder doesn't just harm the elder. It borders on intentionally causing a community schism. It is treated as architectural sabotage of the Sangha itself.
So, looking back at all these intricacies, a really clear picture emerges. The Vinaya is so much more than a simple list of religious sins. It is a meticulously structured, hyperlogical framework designed for long term community survival. From the stacking penalties of probation, to the exact physical coordinates required for a trial, to the mental focus needed to sew a robe, every single rule is a load bearing pillar in the architecture of this ancient society.
I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. We often look at ancient texts as primitive or purely mystical, but seeing the sheer brilliance of this legal framework, if an ancient community over 2 millennia ago could build an administrative code this robust, this democratic, and this meticulous to hold themselves together, what could we learn from them to better govern our modern institutions today? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.